But Brandon, let's move on into the next team we're talking about tonight, and that is the Purdue Boilermakers. And this is a special segment for the podcast because we have joining us our patron, or one of our fellow patrons, Matt, calling in tonight. And the special thing about Matt is he's a huge Purdue Boilermaker fan, so we decided bring him on in. This is the perfect time to talk about Purdue with Matt. Before we get into everything, Matt, how you doing tonight?
I'm good and actually excited to talk Purdue football for once, so let's do it.
Usually it's like for me when we talked about the Illinois Fighting Alliance, like I guess we can do this. I guess we'll get through it. But Purdue, they had a really nice season last year, finished third in the Big Ten West. And the first thing I kind of want to talk to you about, Matt, is about this success because like you said, you're actually excited to talk about Purdue for once. So the first thing I'm going to kind of throw your way is from last year and the success that this Boilermaker team had, do you see that being the trend for this year, or does Purdue take a step back in 2018?
I think nationally, like if people just look at Purdue on the face value from where they were last year, I mean, I think 7-6 doesn't scream huge success, but I think people realize how much of an improvement it was and how much of an impact that Jeff Brom had in his first year. However, I would warn, and I think Purdue might not take a step back necessarily, but I don't know that the record for this year is really going to get all that better. And the reason I say that is because Jeff Brom, he's known for his offense and all of his tricks, but it was really the defense that carried the Purdue last year to their 7-6 record in the bowl win, and they lose pretty much, I think, 8 or 9 starters from that defense. So that's going to be a lot of carryover, a lot of new faces that they're going to be introducing, and I think that's going to, the record might not show the improvement because of that, but I think if they are going to have success, it is going to flip to be more of an offensive attack, which is typical Jeff Brom, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
Go ahead, B.
Matt, do you think that it could kind of flip this season and we could see Purdue end up around again the same spot, but because of the offense this year, maybe the offense is the side that picks up maybe the defense for the pieces that were lost there. You're looking at a quarterback in David Blau, so a guy who only plays in 9 games, did pretty well, serviceable, over 1,100 yards, 9 TDs, 4 interceptions. He goes down, I think, with an ankle injury. That's why he only gets 9 games in. You have kind of a deep running back position with, I think, at least 4 serviceable guys that bring you a lot of different skills, talents, abilities, with speed, power, and agility that they can go with a different guy on a number of different plays. You return 4 offensive linemen, which is great, which is huge, should help you there. And then trying to find that big play receiver, which they really didn't have last year. And maybe with a year under some of these guys' belts or another year under their belt, they maybe find it this season, especially since Jeff Brom is that guy for being very creative and very, I guess you could say, sneaky sometimes on the offensive side of the football. So could you see maybe the same record or around the same record, but that's flipped this season and the offense is what you see be successful for Purdue?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think you talked about it. The big thing is offensive front is a lot of returning starters, which is always huge to have consistency there. It all starts there, and then you've got 2 veterans going to be behind the ball in Blau, who you mentioned. He kind of finally they were doing kind of a quarterback by committee. They'd flip back and forth between Blau and Sindelar until Blau finally established himself as a starter, and then he gets hurt. And so Sindelar closed out the season, and he did it on a torn ACL the last 4 games, which we learned after the season, which makes it all that more impressive.
Yeah.
What he was able to do. But you've got quarterbacks, you've got a line, like you said, they have a lot of good options at running back, kind of some speedy, shifty guys, but then also Richie Worship, who's kind of more of a fullback type 240-pounder that can just pound the ball, in between the tackles. But you're right. I think the one question mark is out on wide receivers. They don't the guys that were more successful for them last year, they lose, and Anthony Mahungu being one of them. But they do return, I can't remember his first name, but Anthrop. They've had a number of Anthrop brothers come through. He was good as a freshman last year. And then their big piece that they'll be introducing is Rondale Moore, a freshman 4-star recruit who chose Purdue over the likes of Ohio State and Alabama, which lets you know how relevant Purdue football is becoming again.
And I think, just to jump in there too, and just how good of a recruiter Jeff Brom is too.
Absolutely, you're spot on. And there's actually like a video that came out a week or so ago of him, Rondale Moore, a pretty small, quick guy, 180 pounds, squatting 600 pounds. So that was kind of impressive.
Not bad.
Really, that doesn't mean anything on the field necessarily, but yeah, I think that's the biggest question mark on offense. But then I think it's going to be fun. And Brom himself already was asked the question, how many trick plays do you want to run this year? And just throwing it out there, he's like, I don't know, about 50 maybe. So if that's any indication, I mean, he comes up with the craziest and most awesome stuff. So that's just independent of record that makes him watchable and very fun. So.
Well, for me, there's two things that I'm thinking about, and it's kind of a little bit off of what Brandon was talking about, a little bit of what you were talking about, Matt, because there's, to me, a lot to unbox with this offense. The first thing for me is my biggest question mark. You mentioned the receivers, but also with the quarterbacks is, yes, they can be healthy by game one, but how are they going to be? Because both quarterbacks coming off of injuries. Like, you had Sindelar, he played the last 3.5 games on a torn ACL. And then, like you mentioned, you had Blau, who got injured in that November 4th game against the Fighting Illini, and that's where kind of Sindelar took over playing on that ACL. The other point to me with this offense is I kind of think that the running back position is going to be the thing to kind of carry them on offense. And the reason why I say that is I think back to the history of the Big Ten. Whenever I've watched Big Ten football, I've seen guys, at least recently in my time, Monta Ball, Melvin Gordon, Jeremy Langford, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott. These guys, it's like good teams, Saquon Barkley just last year. Good teams in the conference have those running backs that they can kind of lean on. And I wonder if this could be a Purdue team that, I mean, just to answer the question we asked at the top of the segment of, can this team carry off of last year if the running backs can give them, like if one of these running backs can give I'll say 750 to an 1,000-yard season. I know 1,000 yards and Purdue fans are going, whoa, you think one of them can give us that? But like if they can give one of them 750 to 1,000 yards, this could be a Purdue Boilermaker team that challenges a Wisconsin, challenges a Northwestern. However, I don't think that'll happen. I think that this team will most likely be the third best team. Maybe the second is their ceiling for the Big Ten West this season. What do you think about that, Matt?
I don't think you're wrong in the sense that the running backs are there's a lot of good ones, a lot of veteran presence in that committee. However, the only reason I don't know if the running back is going to carry the team is because I don't know that Jeff Brom wants them to carry the team. There were times when Purdue had a lot of success running the ball last year, but people would ask Brom, post-game, and he would say he wanted to be throwing the ball more. He really wasn't all that happy that he couldn't throw more, but he felt like they weren't quite there as a unit yet. So I think with a year under his belt there in his system, you're going to see running, right? You need the balance, but I think if anything, he's going to air it out. And just traditionally speaking, you're right. The Big Ten is kind of known as a ground and pound type of conference. However, Purdue's most successful season ever, the Rose Bowl season back in 2000, Drew Brees was throwing the ball 60, 70 times a game. That's kind of what Purdue needs to do. They don't get these supreme athletes, so they kind of have to have their own niche, which is throw the ball around all over the field and kind of beat teams with things they don't see every day.
Now, Matt, if we dive into the schedule a little bit here, You look at some of the games that Purdue has, and at the beginning of the season, they start off right away with Northwestern at home. Northwestern, a team that ended up number 2 on that side of the conference last season, played some good football, and you start off right away with them. And now, you look at Northwestern, and every year there's going to be, every team is going to lose people. Every team's going to lose people, but people will hate me for this, as they usually do, but I always look to Alabama. You would never know that Alabama lost people because they always reload so well. But you start right away with Northwestern, and then as you go out for the next couple of games, you have Eastern Michigan. You'd like to believe that that's a win. Missouri, you'd like to believe that's a win. Boston College is a pretty solid team, though, and should be a really good game. Nebraska, I think you guys lost to Nebraska by Purdue lost to Nebraska by 1 point last season. Illinois should be a win on the road. It'll be like a Purdue home game. Ohio State is a tough game in the middle of the season. You've got Ohio State and then Michigan State. Iowa at home, but Iowa was a team that had flashes of really good things last year, especially in that Ohio State game. And then Wisconsin towards the end of the season, but you played Wisconsin well last year. You only lose 17-9, and Wisconsin obviously had a great season a year ago. How do you see Purdue faring with this schedule, kind of at the beginning, in the middle, and towards the end?
Yeah, so there's no doubt. I think it's a back-heavy schedule, as you alluded to. But I think that kind of the interesting proposition, as you look at it, some of these games in the beginning are probably toss-ups. Like Northwestern, I think we can win that one, but I think the line is like Purdue by 3 points. So basically, just the home field advantage there. Eastern Michigan should be a win, like you alluded to. Missouri, Purdue went into Missouri and beat them 35-3 last year. We're obviously talking two very different teams, but that gives us confidence anyway that we can beat them again, especially at home this time.
Yeah, and Missouri's been in a world of hurt for quite a while.
Right. And then Boston College, again, another not easy, but not overly difficult. You can see Purdue winning that one. So let's just play that out in a crazy scenario where Purdue, somehow has 4 home games to begin the season there and wins all 4. And then goes to Nebraska. I guess I'll say probably loses that one just with it being the first road game, and who knows how quickly Scott Frost will have an impact. But
probably national championship team.
Oh, gosh. And then say you beat Illinois at Illinois, which seems reasonable. That's a 5-1 start, and you got Ohio State coming home. If that were to happen, I think the Jeff Brom hype train would be off the track, just because that game against Ohio State would be the biggest game really in like 10 years probably for the program, given where they've been, having won 9 games the previous 4 years prior to last year's 7-win season. So I just think, kind of looking at that from that perspective, like I keep playing through them, like, yeah, they could beat Missouri, they could beat Boston College, like I can see this happening, but it won't. But it doesn't seem too far out there.
And it's not, and I just want to make one more point before Ricky jumps in here, because what Ricky usually will do is when we go through things and he's looking at a game that's a toss-up game, Ricky most likely gives it to the team that's at home. And Purdue has, like you said, Matt, which is really uncommon for the teams that we've looked at throughout us doing this, that has 4 straight home games to start the season. We have not seen that. This is the first team that I think we've done where we've looked at the schedule, and this is what we've seen: 4 straight home games. Purdue
did have 3 of their first 4 last year were at home.
I know, but I'm just saying, to have your first 4 games right at home, against, and usually when you start the season in a Power 5, you're having your easier teams at the beginning. So to start 4-0 and then go possibly 5-1, like Matt said, you are really off to a good start there, and you've got a ton of confidence building. Even if you don't have the experience or necessarily the entire talent to drive you, that confidence to go into the player's mind, that's big. And I'm sorry I took some of your time, Ricky, but I just wanted to make that point.
Here's what I'm thinking about the schedule is, because I'm comparing it to last year. And last year, first let's look at the non-conference games. Purdue had 3 of them last year. you went 2-1. You beat Mizzou, you beat Ohio, you lost to Louisville. I could see almost that same thing happening this year. You beat Eastern Michigan, that's like your Ohio game. You beat Missouri. The only question I have with Missouri is Drew Lock, because Missouri's going to be an interesting team. Yes, it's at Purdue, but they're going to have 2 cupcake games to start the year, then have Purdue. What does that do? Does that put that team in a lull where it's like, oh, we had 2 easier opponents, now we're getting punched in the face by Purdue and what they want to do, especially offensively? Or do those 2 games get a guy like Drew Lock, who right now in many mock drafts, he's the number 1 quarterback prospect, which in my mind goes, how good is this quarterback field going to be this year for the draft? But we'll talk about that on another day. And Boston College, I know Matt is saying oh, I could see Purdue winning that game, and I could see them winning it. But I'm sorry, we talked about Boston College. We've talked about their running back. I don't, right now, I would give that game to Boston College. And if you're sitting that, if you're a Purdue fan, I'm not mad at that, because okay, it's the same thing we did last year. We went 2-1. The big thing for me this year is the West is going to be the West. So, yeah, you're Nebraska, you lost by a point, but what is Scott Frost going to bring in? Can you beat a Wisconsin that you only lost to 17-9 last year, a Northwestern team that you only beat by 10 points? The biggest thing for me that I would worry about if I was a Purdue fan is last year the teams from the Beast, not the East, the Beast, that you had to play last year were Michigan, Rutgers, and Indiana. You still have to play Indiana this year because that's your biggest rival. However, instead of Michigan and Rutgers, you get Ohio State and Michigan State, where some might go, okay, take the Ohio State. We lose that one. It's just like losing to Michigan. But I would rather have a team like Rutgers on the schedule than Michigan State. And that could be a game late, looking at it late, where you're man, we finished 6-6 last year. Well, man, if we had a team like Rutgers on the schedule, I know they lost to Rutgers last year, so Rutgers fans are going hey, we beat Purdue last year, but it was 14-12. I think that game against Michigan State will be a little bit harder, if not a lot harder, than a game against Rutgers. And that game, I believe, yeah, the Ohio State one's at home. The Michigan State one is on the road. So, Matt, what do you think? To me, that's the question for a Purdue fan in my mind is, what is your thought process about playing a Ohio State, Michigan State, rather than a Michigan and a team like Rutgers?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, and I think it's probably fitting given that Purdue's schedule was a little easier last year. I think this year is actually rated, going in based off last year's success as one of the tougher schedules in all of college football. But I mean, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of Ohio State coming to Ross-Ade, Purdue's home field, just because, like I said, if the stars align and you have a good record, and you can that can kind of be just a get the program back on the map sort of game, right? Especially if that gets pushed to a night game, primetime sort of game. I don't think anything bad comes from that. And if you lose, you weren't expected to win anyway. So that one kind of just, it is what it is. I think it's fine. The Michigan State one, yeah, I don't think you're going to go in there and win. But, if we're talking Jeff Brom having an impact in the long term, I think these are the sorts of games that Purdue needs to get exposed to, not expect to win. Maybe you're looking to kind of beat sort of the more Iowa teams that you feel are more in your tier for now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move up to the next tier here in the coming years. But, yeah, definitely tough games that I don't expect them to win, but definitely can be program builders for the future.
And then, for me, the last thing that's kind of a yin and yang thing for me is I look at it and go, well, a good thing is you don't get Wisconsin until November 17th. I'd rather have Wisconsin at the near end. I know Indiana is always going to be the last game for Purdue, but I would love to have Wisconsin as close to the end, because to me, Wisconsin's going to be the top, if not at the top of the division. And if I'm sitting there a game behind or even record in the conference as Wisconsin, I want to play them as late as possible to make sure I get enough experience under my belt. The yang to that is you get Northwestern right out of the gate, and that's another team that could be at the top with you. So I would say if Purdue wins that game against Northwestern, that November 17th game, I will say, will be for the Big Ten West, and who's playing at the Big Ten championship against probably Ohio State is probably the favorite to win the other side, unless Jim Harbaugh actually fields a team that can beat the Buckeyes in Ann Arbor. But if Purdue loses against Northwestern, then I would sit there and go, this is a team that'll probably be third in the division and kind of have a similar season to last year, but maybe beat like the Nebraskas and the Minnesotas and the teams that you would expect them to beat. What do you think, B?
Yeah, I think that with this schedule, it's a bit of a challenging schedule, I think, for Purdue, but I think it's one where, Matt, if you're a fan, you're kind of sitting there going, good. I want to see what this Jeff Brom team is made of in year 2. And if you see some struggles, okay, that's not bad. I mean, people thought that it was going to be a rebuilding season for him last year, and I think that there was surprise, but also excitement around them being 7-6 and winning their first bowl game since 2011. So to take a step forward in last year, well, it felt like a leap forward, but then to take a step back this year possibly, to then hopefully take another step or two forward next year, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you get to see what your team is made of here in year 2, maybe where the offense has come, if everyone can stay healthy, if you can have a healthy quarterback and a consistent quarterback that's in there. One, guy. I'm really big on the one quarterback system, but see what you get from your running backs. Can a wide receiver step up? Is the offensive line going to hold up? I think those are all things that are going to be interesting. And then how's the defense going to do with a number of guys departing? That was a huge strength for them last season. Is that going to hold up again this year? Or are they going to have some question marks? They replaced a couple of guys in the secondary. They, replaced some guys up front in a position that was their strength last year. They now have question marks. But what can they do to combat that and see if they can at least get to where they were last season? If they can get to another 6-6 and then potentially 7-6 season this year, I think you're looking at a good team that's continuing to move forward in this Jeff Brom system.
Well, I was going to jump in, and you're actually reading my mind, B, because that was the question I was going to kind of set up for Matt kind of to end everything is, like you said, losing a lot on defense. To be specifically, the thing I was looking at is you lose both of your corners from last year. The question that I was going to ask, this was a team, Nick Holt, defensive coordinator, they kind of jumped out to a good year after being 117th in scoring in 2016. They shot up to top 25 in scoring. As a Purdue fan, Matt, what do you expect from this defense in Nick Holt's second year as the DC for Purdue?
Yeah, I think it's going to look a little rough, and just because you're going to be transitioning a lot of new guys in there. But you do return the top tackler, Marcus Bailey, at linebacker, which is obviously a key position, as well as the 2 safeties. So it's really the corners, the linebackers, and then some up front. I guess I expect to see improvement throughout the year. Like I said, it might be a little rough to begin with, but Nick Holt clearly established that he's a good coach, and he's such a fiery guy in the sidelines. Like, I'd be scared to not play well for him. That I have a lot of confidence that throughout the year you'll see that unit improve a lot, even with the young guys in there.
Matt, can we get from you before we let you go? Can we get a prediction as a Purdue fan? What do you predict?
Undefeated.
What do you predict realistically for Purdue this season in terms of a record?
I'm just going through really quickly here. I'm going to say I'll go 6-6 and then hopefully a bowl win. So I'll say 7-6. Although I will say ceiling is there's not a crazy scenario where it couldn't be Purdue's playing Wisconsin for a berth to the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, I think
it's like I said,
and Ricky alluded to it earlier too.
Beat Northwestern. Yeah. If you beat Northwestern, I think you're playing Wisconsin for the division at the end of the year. But
right,
it all
and I don't
comes
think
down
you
to
can
if
ask
you
for-
beat Northwestern, though, to start the year.
You're right. It's a huge first game, and I guess the one thing I don't know is if Thorson, their quarterback, is going to be ready or not. But we'll see.
Well, and before I ask you, Brandon, your final expectations for the Purdue Boilermakers, the one thing about the defense I want to say that should be better is Bailey that Matt mentioned. Last year, he played a lot at the Sam linebacker position just to get, hey, we got to get, it's kind of like basketball, like the basketball that we're seeing now in the NBA, where it's like, hey, LeBron, you're not a power forward, but we're going to play you there just to get the best 5 players on the court. They just wanted the best 11 guys on the field. Now that he's going to be moving back to his natural linebacker position, he should be able to do even better than he did. And, I mean, he had the second most tackles at 89. So, I mean, he'll just have more tackles at his original linebacker position. But what do you think, B? What are your final expectations for the Purdue Boilermakers?
Yeah, I'm with Matt on this one. I would not be surprised to see them back where they were at the end of last season at 6-6, and then possibly winning a bowl game and going 7-6 again. I don't think that's an unrealistic prediction for them, and I could definitely see it happening. Again, they lost to Northwestern last year 23-13, and that was towards the end of the year. And now they get them at the beginning of this next season to start things out of the gate, August 30th on that Thursday. So it's going to be really interesting to see what team is more prepared and ready for that game. And like you guys both mentioned, if they win that game against Northwestern, you could definitely see some excitement towards the end of the season with Purdue possibly fighting Wisconsin for that side of the Big Ten.
Right now, I'm going to sit and say they'll be still the third best team in this division, unless a dark horse like Nebraska shows itself. But other than that, this team, third best in the division. The ceiling is they win against Northwestern. They have a really good season.
The ceiling is the roof, of course.
The ceiling is the roof. Thanks, MJ. But they're battling Wisconsin for the division in a Big Ten title berth, most likely against Ohio State is what I will say. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. What do you expect from Purdue this season? Will they be as good as they were last year? Will they be better than last year? Let us know what you think down below in that comment section.